So for Heschel, the notion of revelation is very much, and religious experience is very much tied up with time. Because as he said last time, he wants to have um, a sense of mystery about what he calls sort of pure events. A lot of our lives are spent identifying causes and effects. And the way we identify causes and effects is we try to highly simplify the situations we find ourselves in. And that's what laboratories are for. We want scientists. Scientists say, I will run a controlled experiment. I will make everything super simple so that it's a clean lab and there's no contamination. And I'm going to take 20 identical mice and I'm going to give them 20 identical things. They're trying to eliminate as many factors as possible to identify a single cause and effect. And that's very, very useful. But in real life, a lot of times there are so many causes and effects happening at the same time. There's something like simultaneity or just a lot going on. And so what I called, or I think I called channeling the system, that a prophet is, and I'm sorry to use these spiritual words, hey, a prophet, or forget just a prophet, a moment of awe even can be. There are moments when you, there are moments when you are, when one might be feeling like all the energies or many of the energies at once and not just one. So simultaneity is a really important concept in religious studies. And some people just will resist it forever. They're like, no, don't give me any simultaneity, that there's always a cause and effect, right? I can identify. And what I said with Heschel, when someone says something like, the reason Nadav didn't finish, had a profound moment of awe that he should serve the Jewish people as a rabbi and stop writing his dissertation after 10 years and 2 chapters. I can tell you why, because both of his parents didn't finish their PhDs and ended up joining and serving the Jewish people. It was implanted in him. So I identified the cause. And what Heschel would say about a prophet or about anyone is, oh, that's relevant. I'm not saying it's not relevant, because when you're channeling, when you're going through life and the richness of it in the lives that we have, you are you. You are not just a passive receptacle. You are you. You carry your history with you. You carry your subconscious with you. You carry the collective unconscious with you. You carry it all. So all of that's relevant. But that doesn't mean that I figured it out, I identified the one cause. Like your life experience is also important. You can start identifying other causes that affect you. As I said last time, the zeitgeist. Just what is 2025? What are we all going through? Like maybe October 7th has something to do with it. Maybe college protests at Columbia have something to do with it. Maybe what's going on with your aging parents or aging yourself has something to do with it. There's so many things that are going on at the same time that really the richness of life experience is learning to embrace, live, and understand oneself as living in a complex system of many things happening simultaneously. I used what perhaps is a bad example or a misleading example about the body, and when I mentioned the endocrine system, which is I remember when my wife a long time ago had, like, there was an endocrine thing that came up. And I remember the doctors were like, is it the thyroid or is it the this or is it the that or is it the ovaries? That's what they do. We want them to do that. But then when I started reading things on my own, and I don't just mean like Dr. Phil or something. I mean, I tried to read scientific papers and all of that. Realized, my God, the endocrine system is so complex. There are signals going from the pituitary. It's not a single highway. It's not like boom, it's not a billiard ball. This sent a message there, that sent a message there, then this sent it to another gland. That caused the heart rate to go up. They are really, when you start getting into the complex messages, it's of the endocrine system, it's like the nervous system. There are neurons firing so much at the same time. There's so many things happening. It's almost better just to think of it as like a body, as a system, as an ecosystem. It's a big ecosystem. So the religious experience in some ways and wisdom and getting through life is sort of when you realize you're going through a richness of many things happening at the same time. A prophet is someone who can actually, in his definition, channel what the universe is feeling and puts it into words. They don't just have Trump. They've got Trump and October 7th. They've got Trump and October 7th and AI. And then add into that, they've got aging. And then they've got I don't, they've got they're channeling like, why did 20 people just write poems that are all almost identical? And one person's in Asia, and one person's in China, and two are in Maine. Like, why are the like what is what what's going on with this body in which we live, this universe, or the ship we're all on, or this planet Earth, that we're all a part of something that's like in a complete system. We're all kind of interconnected. They're kind of channeling it, and they're able to put in kind of what the universe is feeling into words. And they use their own experience. Maybe one person grew up with two poet parents, or they always wanted to be a poet, and they're going to put into poetry, and their name is Jeremiah or Isaiah. And another person is like, I just want to give you some a little social justice right now. My name is Amos, and another person is like, I'm really into paradigms, and I'm Hosea. I want to like play out this paradigm of marriage and covenant and see what that could tell us. Like, I think that's a way to put into words what God's trying to say. And they're also nonprofits. I mean, there's us. I mean, we're trying to, what does it mean to try to put our own, like, how much can we like feel where our lives are? I mean, I think that one of the reasons maybe people say Nadav, and I'm not thinking people are thinking about me that often, but honestly, but you know, there's some rabbis who are sure talking a lot about October 7th, about Trump, about racism, about this, about Colombia. They're very quick. And I'm a little bit more like, I'm thinking about all this stuff, but I'm also absorbing it all. Like I'm trying to have like I'm still feeling a lot of what's happening. I'm not the first person to be like, how dare they attack Iran? Or how dare they do this? I mean, I'm still trying to still absorb it all. And I ain't no prophet. But what I'm saying is that we're all doing this. Like in some ways, what life and wisdom is absorbing the system, trying to fool the ego a bit by getting it out of the way. We have a society that certainly feels to me that we're in a moment. When I say moment, I mean like a generation or two. We're in a moment in history of a lot of concern about blame and grievance. Is there a connection between trying to go in this broader systematic way of not just single cause, single effect, single blame, single response? And I think yes. I mean, I think that what Heschel says is you have a greater sense of mutual responsibility when you feel interconnected. We're all going through life. We're channeling a lot. Can we have moments of putting into words a little bit of what, maybe not the whole universe, maybe we're not Jeremiah, maybe we're not a prophet, but for ourselves, putting in a feeling of what this situation calls for, the real enlightenment many philosophers get to about situational awareness, that that you kind of have to grow up. You want to have to grow up as a philosopher to realize how important reading situations is, because everyone's got a theory about, oh, all the whole world's, it's all about patriarchy, or it's all about racism, or it's all about capitalism, or it's all about this, or it's all about that, or it's all just about identity. And then you realize on some level that understanding the complexity of situations goes beyond mere intellectual cause and effect analysis. It goes toward, frankly, sort of reading the energies. It would be like if you were trying to be a little bit like God the judge. If God were in this room, what would God be wanting from us? And I talked about this a lot in the Kabbalah course because it's very big in Kabbalah. Would God be wanting me to channel Chesed? Would God be wanting me to channel Gevura? Like, like what would be healing? What does this moment call for? And it's not this moment called for like coming from my head. It's this moment being called for coming from my sense of interconnection with what the situation I'm in, what's around me. Because real wisdom is knowing how to act in situations. Time is important because what does it mean to live in the moment, feel the moment, heal the moment? And for Heschel, if you have an inspiration about, I think the moment calls for this, or I think I'm finally ready, I think I finally feel called to say something to my friends about Gaza, or I feel called to say something about Colombia or whatever, or just, I don't know, anything, that this is like an inspiration that comes into you in a moment, and the moment should be felt, should be honored as a moment without being analyzed why you came up with it, right? Like, oh, it's because of this, because of this. Can you just say, I'm trying to feel a lot at once and take in and get my ego out of the way to the extent that that's possible. The ego, in my opinion, based on everything I study, I view it like a yappy dog, with all due respect to dogs, right? It's the yappy dog that wants all of your attention. You're never going to get rid of it. But what you can learn to do is to take a bone and throw it and give yourself a little time. So like that's the best you can do with the ego. And Halakhah is full of like examples of ways to do this. Like, I know you really want to be doing this, but you have to do this right now. And it's gonna throw a bone for that dog to go chase. But it's gonna be back any minute. So don't think you got rid of the ego. He talks about the power of events, allowing something to be an event that introduces something into the causal chain, whether it's a prophetic event or a moment of awe. And where I want to connect that to next, because it's situational, it's trying to put the ego out, it's interconnected, it's a mixture of active and passive, it's not one or the other. It connects to trying to find holiness in moments. So it's a religion of time, both in terms of revelation, inspiration, awe, but also learning to care for moments, seeing the ordinary, seeing the holy in the ordinary. Feels like it's very much what defines Judaism. You don't wait to go to the Michelangelo Cathedral to feel the Spirit of God. Like, you can feel the Spirit of God in the art. You can feel, as anybody used to see My Dinner with Andre in those old days. Today, My Dinner with Andre means something else. But in the days of My Dinner with Andre, it was, can I just feel the presence of God in the cigar store? And the answer should be yes. I mean, like in every moment is possible to see the holy in the ordinary. Our moments of awe are teaching us. They're trying to teach us how things are, look in the perspective of the whole system, something greater. Um, I mean, if you're being really intellectual, can your dog be your best friend? Come on. Nah, that's stupid because your dog, I mean, they just want food from you. Let me explain. We're biologically bred in a symbiotic system, blah, blah, blah. My attitude is, I learned, like, your dog can be your best friend. Like, if you don't know that, then you don't know how to see the holy and the ordinary. Judaism is supposed to be trying to train us to see, to cherish moments, see the holy in the ordinary through moments. And so Halakhah structures our lives because without Halakhah, we would be severely distracted. He says that, and I know people who don't keep Halakhah think that's silly, but again, maybe it's just an experiential thing, which is Halakhah is trying to order your life to make possible moments of appreciation so that your ego, your will, your momentum in life. I mean, come on, you're in the middle of that essay. You want to keep writing that. Too bad that there are 3 star, too bad that it's sunset on Friday came. Like, he, it's supposed to try to create spaces, holiday spaces, sensual spaces, meaning sniffing the aroma of the spices, the Seder using flavors and foods, the Sukkah using the feeling of being outside. Halakhah is supposed to create a structure that sort of keeps you moving through time in a kind of regulated way so you don't just fall prey to living a life of driven by a combination of your own desires, the latest self-help book you read. If anybody else is hooked on self-help books, join the club with me, but I realize like, I mean, they can be helpful, but it's also like, really, that's what life is. My latest thing is my diet. My latest thing is, I don't know, I'm going to take a walk every day. Like Halakhah is meant to be like, listen, we have a communal structure. You have social support for other people are taking the same day off you're taking off. And there's hospitality, there are all kinds of structures in place to help you feel the holy in time. And so we're a religion of time rather than space. The idea is Shabbat in a way is a teacher, so that when you're going through your normal life, you have moments like Shabbat in it. But you have to labor. I mean, we do have to work so that but the idea is that the lessons you learn on Shabbat do carry over. I mean, I do think that there is, and honestly, if all you do is one day a week, I mean, like I wish I had more quality time with my kids. But I come from that generation. I barely saw my dad. I mean, my dad, he worked Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, spent the day teaching at seminary, spent all the evenings at the synagogue and then weekends at the synagogue. So the one time I had with him was, and I didn't see him at Friday night dinner because he was doing services. So when we got home from Hebrew school, Saturday school, and synagogue on Saturday around 1:30, and we ate lunch at home. We didn't do lunch at the synagogue. We didn't have one. I have my dad every Saturday afternoon until he went to go listen to an opera and whatever, my brothers didn't want to play with me anymore, or he didn't want to play. That's pretty amazing. I don't know if we didn't have Shabbat, if I would have seen him any more than that. Even if I just worked the other 6 days a week, having Shabbat would teach me a lot about the meaning of life because I had those moments to sanctify. It's during Shabbat when I learned to read because I'm used to reading for school. And I was used to reading for school back then. And I still believe, not to editorialize too much, that I can't believe what books they have schools teach, both when I was young and still today. I'm not a fan of Catcher in the Rye. I think Romeo and Juliet is the worst play Shakespeare ever wrote. I mean, some of the stuff they think are classics. The Great Gatsby, okay, yeah, I'm with you. I'm like, whatever. And so I learned to read because on Shabbat I couldn't take notes. So why read for school? And I'd actually, read for fun. So when I read J.R.R. Tolkien, or I read other stuff, who knows, E.B. White, Trumpet of the Swan, when I was little, those things. And so it did teach me like the holiness of reading, which I didn't get during the week. Right. So I wanted to say that I didn't defend Halakhah a lot, what he calls a pattern for living, but he thinks that a will that doesn't have a spiritual structure is going to go astray. It's going to be just trying on this fad, then that fad, and but it's going to think it's free, but it's going to be influenced by its environment a lot. So we have Halakhah. What we're going to finish with is in this course is Halakhah and Aggadah. So let's do something very, very foundational. I do like the generalizations. I mean, when they're appropriate. Think about our scripture. Think about our Talmud. What is distinctive in many ways about our holy writings? When you look at other religions, I mean, I've studied many times the teachings of early Buddhism. There are a series of lectures. Later Buddhism, you'll get a series of sutras. Maybe in Zen, you get a series of parables. So you have genres to what the religious literature is trying to convey. One of my big frustrations with folks is I think they read the Torah wrong because they're reading it through other genres. I'm reading it as literature. Isn't that enlightened? Well, that's fine, but I also don't read Shakespeare's sonnets as if they're a manual for my toaster. Like, in other words, that's nice. You like literature. It may introduce interesting things, but maybe that's not what the Torah thinks it is, And so so what is the genre? Because the genre is meant to be there for a reason. A parable is there for a reason. The New Testament has a lot of parables from Jesus. They're structured to be very clear. They're operating as a certain kind of metaphor. The metaphor is there to teach. Allegory is a particular genre. So what is Jewish holy writings? If you look at the Torah, it's a mixture of laws and stories. It often does not separate them. It mixes them together. So you could be in the middle of you could just have been reading through all of Parashat Mishpatim, law after law after law. You can't move the boundary of your neighbor. If your neighbor's animal wanders in and causes damage, this happens. If you think your neighbor's animal is yours because it wandered onto your property and you knowingly keep it, and then you realize that you give back to your neighbor, but then you pay 1/5 because you knew you did it on purpose and you got caught. But it's law, 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 law. If a poor person borrows money from you, you should say yes. because it is very, very powerful for us to redeem another and not cause them to become an indentured servant to someone else. But if they come to it, but you don't collect their collateral if their collateral is the only way they can make money. So if they're a tailor, and all this in Parshat Mishpatim, like Exodus chapters 22, 23, whatever. So, but then it'll just go to a story. By the way, then Moses' father-in-law showed up and they had this conversation, and you're like, what's that all about? They're not necessarily connected. Sometimes they are, more often they're not. And then the Talmud and the Mishnah work exactly the same way. It's really weird. It'll be like, I don't know, today I'll take a section from Mishnah Avodah Zarah. What are the rules against idol worship? You can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. Once upon a time. So when you go to rabbinical school, a lot of your life is spent like 8 hours a day saying, so tell me, Martha, tell me the halakhah on this, and Rowan, tell me the halakhah on this, and then there's a Misa, right? A Misa is a story. What was the Misa? You guys were all doing the homework last night. And then Harvey says, after that, there was a Misa, Rabbi Gamliel had a donkey, but the donkey was old, and the donkey, and you're like, what? There's no explanation. This is not a typical legal code. So Heschel's like, these really are the two interlocking dimensions of our life, story and halakhah. So how do they work? And he has this chart. Let's look at the chart together. So I did a quote from Jacob Neusner where he says, one view is halakhah are the norms of behavior. Aggadah are the norms of belief. I like that quote. Halakhah is about laws. Aggadah, which means the stories, are about justice and about personal conscience. But this course on Heschel, so we go to Heschel. So read to yourself what he says about Halakhah and read to yourself what he says about Aggadah. I think just even Heschel's quote alone, I think it's transformative for my understanding of Judaism, and I wanted to share it with you, which is the idea that, like, Halakhah teaches us how to perform common acts. I love that. The Halakhah of eating, the Halakhah of preparing for Shabbat, the Halakhah of saying thank you for the benefit of something that grew from the earth. And I love that. And so Halakhah, but Aggadah teaches us how to participate in the eternal drama. Now, I want to be careful that we're not always participating in the eternal drama. I made a joke once about, because it comes from a real story. When one rabbi once told me, I got the perfect parking spot today. Hashem made it just for me. I'm like, you know what? Sometimes a parking spot is just a parking spot. And sometimes maybe it is the eternal drama. You know what I mean? But like sometimes there's halakhah around parking spots. I bet if they had parking spots back, I mean, there would be if there were parking spots back in the time of you know what? They would have been like, what happens if Nadav and Rowan pull up at the same time? It sounds like Seinfeld, right? Who gets the spot? Is it on the left? That would be perfect for halakhah. Halakhah is about what's the right way? Is there a right and a wrong way to perform common acts? And there is. We live in common life. We share an ordinary world, even if we're not ordinary because we're all fragments of God. How do we work in that ordinary world and regulate things and make things fair? Interestingly, according to Neusner, and I think Heschel would agree, Aggadah is more about justice. The reason being this, it could just be that Halakhah has a rule that says the person who's on the same side of the street gets the parking spot. I'm sorry, I'm not using a real, trust me, I've read the Shulchan Aruch. It is a lot like this. Who's on that side gets the spot. Now, it could be that the rabbi's got a hurt foot and the other person is, I don't know, cross-country runner for the U of M team. Justice would be they let me have it. But Halakhah would be like, I'm sorry, it's not your right of way. So they can conflict. And a lot of people find this strange, but to me, it's a very fundamental thing to understand that Halakhah is not to be denigrated, but it's about, just what he's saying, it's about teaching us how to perform common acts, but it's missing a whole dimension. And that dimension is the stories, the story of your life, your narrative, what it feels like individually to live. Halakhah is about the community. It's about how can you have a community that functions and is on the same page. I once gave a sermon on Erev Rosh Hashanah I was kind of proud of during the Zoom pandemic. Um, it was on, it started with daylight savings time. And it started with the idea of think about life before clocks. Like, what's the purpose of all of this? It's to get us, it actually, as a lot of you know, a lot of it started with trains. That, you can't have someone who's going to the station in the middle of the West, where it's a town of three people and they miss the train. So how do we have a common frame of reference and a common life? And I would say fairness, John Rawls, brilliant philosopher, he said, I mean, he asked the question, which is, are justice and fairness the same thing? He wrote a famous article called Justice as Fairness. But justice and fairness can be two different things. Halakhah can be about fairness. Something greater than halakhah is about justice. Halakhah is about the communal. Aggadah is about the individual in many ways. And even in the Torah, the Aggadah, these stories can be very different than the laws. They don't seem to be connected. They are certainly not parables. They are certainly not allegories, and they are certainly not illustrations. They are just not. There's something else. So Heschel would say an appropriate thing, which is, why are they there? Why don't we cut them out? As I probably told you before, the first legal code is a really important thing in Judaism. The Torah is not really a per se legal code, although it includes legal codes. The Mishnah and Talmud include legal material, but they include a lot of stories. So the first real legal code was the Rif. It was by Isaac Alfasi. And all he did was he took the Talmud and it was Isaac Alfasi, and he's known as the Rif, Rabbi Isaac Alfasi. And the Rif basically just took the Talmud and he cut out all of the stories. And then he published it. And that was our first legal code. He's like, we don't need the stories to know what the law is. He's not wrong. The RIF is still considered a foundational legal code that you would refer to. I mean, I could write RIF, but Alfasi is like ALFS. No, I appreciate the question. Okay, back to this. Aggadah, Halakhah gives us knowledge. Aggadah gives us aspiration. Halakhah prescribes, Aggadah suggests. Halakhah has to be definite and quantitative. It can't be that you think that I don't know, you think that this fish is sufficiently kosher, and you think that fish is not kosher. It has to be more definite than that. And if we're going to talk about something complicated like swordfish, we have to have a common frame of reference, which is, okay, let's talk. What are the scales? Let's look at the scales. Let's talk to a marine biologist. Let's have a conversation. Let's quote a legal code. It has to try to quantify and be definite. Aggadah alludes. Think about Heschel saying, like, if you're channeling the universe on some level, you're channeling a situation, you're trying to ask in some ways, what is God doesn't speak to me, but God can allude. God can make allusions, interesting synchronicities, a feeling I have, an awareness of something that just happened. Reading someone's facial expression instead of listening to their words. Their facial expressions alluding to something that their words are not saying. That this is our spiritual life. Our spiritual life is in the realm of Aggadah and not necessarily in Haggadah. Aggadah deals with the whole of life. Who am I as a soul? What's my role? Like, it's the Halakhah deals with the details. What is my role as the rabbi? What is my role as the mashgiach? What is my role in the ritual affairs committee? What is my role on the board? Like, you know what I mean? It's dealing with what's my role in this situation. But Aggadah is like, what does it mean to be a person? Like, what does it mean to be a whole person in this situation? And they can conflict. They shouldn't be completely separate, but then he wants to show a little bit of how they're, but as he quite says there, Aggadah is your ineffable relations to God, to others, and to the world. Your stories, your experiences that you would call your spiritual experiences. And so I have an exercise here. Let's just do a little bit of it. Someone tell me, is your relationship to God, are specifics part of Halakhah or Aggadah? I was thinking Halakhah. You can make a case for Aggadah, but easy to follow. Halakhah or Aggadah? So I would say halakhah because you shouldn't have to think too hard. Is that a meat knife or a milk knife? But to think, what do I owe my children this summer? That's probably not going to be, what did I call it? Easy to follow. It's like, and I mean, I know Ryan's looking at me like one thing that Aggadah deals a lot more with chesed. So like one of the questions that's an interesting question to ask are acts of situational love or kindness, where you read a situation, you're like, you know what? I'm going to let that person have the parking spot. I'm not exactly sure why. I just have a feeling, or I can see a placard, or I just see it. For me, I just see they're having a bad day. Let them have it. Like I'm thank God I'm not having a bad day. I've had plenty of bad days where I want the parking spot. Today is not one of those. Halakhah doesn't say anything about are you having a good day or a bad day. That's not easy to follow. That's not quantitative. Um, and and it's an interesting question because technically, practicing acts of situational kindness is a mitzvah, right? On the universe rests on avodah, service, Torah, study, learning, knowledge, halacha, and gemilut chasadim, acts of chesed. But they're not prescribed. Like it's a complicated question because we're supposed to be doing them, but there are a few. Ryan, do you want to tell us one or two that are actually like specified in halacha? Precisely. So in a couple of places, they're like, so that's why, you got to comfort the bereaved. Now the halacha is you bring a meal and you do this and you turn over the bed and blah, blah, blah. But you're supposed to comfort them, which is less detail. You get the details in that, but you're supposed to go beyond. There's the casserole. When does minion start? You're supposed to comfort them. So, but the truth is, most of this Aggadah life, we have a couple of examples, but clearly we're supposed to be doing a lot more of it. And that's why if you said I had a spiritual experience, I think that belongs under Aggadah, because I think it would be weird to just be like, I was practicing halacha because you got to do a good deed. I think it's more like, no, that's a story for a sermon. I mean, sermons should have stories I don't like the sermons that are like, I always wanted the Yankees to win the World Series and it did. You know what that's like. That always makes me want to head for the exits. But I like the stories where people are like, I had this really weird experience when my mother was sick and I went to the hospital. Yeah.
So was that fairness or justice? Because you said justice was Aggadah and fairness was Halakhah, but it feels more like fairness for that individual rather than this justice, I think.
If you're talking about fairness in Rawlsian sense, forget who you are, forget that you had a lot of stuff going on. We have to have some rules and some accountability. It's only fair to have accountability. To give you a really clear example, if one person comes in who shoplifted and the judge says, you get 30 days in jail, and the next person comes in and shoplifts and the judge says, you know what, you were in a rush or you were hungry, I'm going to let you go. My reading of political philosophy is that wasn't fair. To have a system that one person gets off and the other person doesn't because the judge wanted to practice some kindness. I think Heschel would say in an example like that, they would say, Heschel, I'm just guessing, I'm no Heschel. The judge was trying to practice justice, real justice. Like it's like, listen, I know this may not be fair to the other guy, but there's something in a greater picture. There's something going on here. I know I shouldn't pick a hot topic, and I'm sorry to pick a hot topic. I'll just say quickly I think this is one of the difficulties that DEI faces. DEI is trying to bring justice, capital J, to our society, but it often wants to do it by regulating rules that then are very, very unfair. And I think that they sometimes don't recognize that slapping a massive quota of affirmative action on something to rectify cosmic justice is problematic. I think that's one of the reasons there's been such a pushback. I'm not arguing one way or the other. Don't guess my politics, but I'm trying to say what I understand is the extreme discomfort in our society with what's going on with those things is sometimes when you try to make capital J justice, little f legal fairness, you're going to get imbalance. You're going to get things that are really shocking. let's not get caught up in the words, which I just was, because in Hebrew, you're dealing with different words going on. The word like would be deen, that often for justice is deen. But deen means applying the rules fairly. So practicing mercy with one, but holding another accountable for the same action, that goes against deen justice because deen is very specific about that. But there are other words for justice, like righteousness is often translated as justice, trust me. I would say halakhah is more dealing with sameness, and Aggadah is more dealing with, I'm sorry, but here I need to make an exception, or or the situation isn't clear about what to do, which is, I think, a very classic example of Talmud. So the Mishnah, which is the earliest layer of the Talmud, a resident of a co-op built apartment building or home abutting a shared private communal courtyard can be compelled to contribute toward the building of a gatehouse. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, however, says that not all courtyards really require a gatehouse. So here we have classic halachic situation. You have a homeowners association. You have some common areas. And someone says, you know what, we need a doorman, or we're going to build a gate to the common area. You can imagine either Jerusalem or places where you have these alleys. They're generally, are they public or are they private? They're not a street, but they're an alley where people access. Or you could think of modern Western culture where do we want to get a doorman for the apartment building we're not feeling secure? So the question is, because I know that piece of Talmud pretty well, in Halakhah, for us to have a society, if Martha says, I'm against the gatehouse, and I want to say something here to this whole HOA board, which is it's not even about the money. Although I think there are people who may not have the money to pay for a doormat, and you're going to run them out of the units. But it's something more, which is this changes the character of our community. And what if the HOA majority votes according to their bylaws? Too bad. Does Martha have to pay? So the question here, it's classic halacha, is can you be compelled to contribute to a project of your co-op or HOA if you have voted against it? And the answer is yes, because that's what bylaws are. That's the way it works. And I'm sorry, Martha, you can move out or not. Yes, halacha, you have to pay. It's the way it works. And it's not depressing. We need to have a sensible, fair system. But then so then what happens? Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, by the way, says, not all courtyards really require a gatehouse. So let's not validate the idea. What if they don't need it? But what if they want it? What if we don't need all of this security? But there's three people who are like, we're all going to get shot if we don't have security, blah, 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 blah. I'm just saying, right? Answer is, he's like, by the way, maybe you don't need all the security if you actually look at the statistics, but doesn't matter. People say they want the security guard anyway. Ed, we love you. We want the security guard. So then the Talmud comments on it. This Mishnah would seem to show that a gatehouse or a doorman is a good thing. But how can this be? Once upon a time. It's a maisa. Sorry, that's the Yiddish pronunciation of a maasa. A maisa, once upon a time. There was a chassid, then not a modern chassid, a pious person, a pious man with whom the prophet Eliyahu Hanavi would chat from time to time. Until one day, this pious man made a gatehouse, after which Eliyahu Hanavi never spoke to him again. Apparently, when he erected the gatehouse, the cries of the poor could no longer be heard by the residents within. Now, this Misa is pretty powerful because if you came to my audition weekend of 2018, I got to teach one text. I taught about the cries of the poor because the cries of the poor, if people don't do anything about the cries of the poor, God will bring plagues. God will bring the destruction of the climate. God will bring the gorges to open upon, the skies. We have to pay attention to the cries of the poor, or our society could be destroyed by God. So you better listen to the cries of the poor. And as the Talmud says, the cries of the poor go straight to heaven. Good luck with Rav Nadav's prayers, because they say they go through many locked gates. before they could ever actually get to God. But the cries of the poor, they open every lock. They go through all of the gates to God. And so exactly. And so this is pretty bad. Also, how does the prophet Elijah, if you know this, in Jewish lore, the prophet Elijah appears as what? Like at the Passover Seder.
As a beggar.
As a beggar. Good. So the prophet Elijah will show up as a beggar, as a diseased person. They're at the gates. They're the ones who are like, I got leprosy. I can't work. I got the bad back. And you're like, you're probably a liar and I'm not going to give you any money. Or it's the Seder time. Let's open up the door. Let all who are hungry come and eat. And someone shows up. You're like, oh, but not you. It's a ritual. It's a symbol. You can go. So in Judaism, Elijah the prophet is the one who announces the coming of the Messiah. And the reason we have no Messiah is that Elijah is constantly getting mistreated because Elijah appears as the most marginalized. And I would say, even beyond that, like Elijah can change appearance. Elijah could appear as a Muslim. I mean, in my opinion, Elijah could appear as a woman. Elijah could appear as so that you don't know if Elijah is like a spirit or something, or an angel or a herald or a mystical thing. So this is pretty bad that they're like, of course you can, Harvey and Rav Nadav voted for the gatehouse and Martha lost and she's got to pay or she got to move out. But all we did was prevent the coming of the Messiah. But it's fine. You got HOAs. I mean, it ends with like HOA. Why doesn't it change the rule? Heschel's making a very brilliant observation. Frequently, the Aggadah either has nothing to do with the law or it does have to do with the law, but it doesn't change the law. I'll give you another example, which is one that you probably know. So, but it comes up, which is the Achnai's oven. Raise your hand if you know the story of Achnai's oven, which is one of the Achnai. It's in the Talmud. So one of the most famous, what are called like a foundational story in the Talmud, because it's about Judaism, is the case where the rabbis are having a debate over whether a new kind of oven is susceptible to ritual impurity. And it's very, very interesting because it actually comes from a rule in the Torah, and it is a newly devised oven that is made by it's modular. So it comes in parts. And there's a rule in the Torah that an oven that you cook bread in, it's susceptible to impurity by things like snakes and insects, but it has to be of a certain size. So they're like, well, if it's built from these like modular parts, so they have a debate. So the rabbis say, you know what? It's kosher. It's okay. You don't have to worry about it. This new oven is like the Shabbos elevator. It works. It overcomes the rule. You don't have to worry about this thing. And there's one guy, Rabbi Eliezer. And Rabbi Eliezer says, you're all wrong. The oven is not okay. It's susceptible to ritual impurity. For sake of argument, let's just say it's unkosher, or it can easily be unkosher. So they turn and they say, look, we've had the discussion. You've made your arguments. We're all against you. And so we're going to take a vote. Rabbi Eliezer has it's a Misa. This is a story. It's not really about the oven. Rabbi Eliezer says, okay, but you're all wrong. Okay, you're wrong. So then Rabbi Eliezer says, okay, if I'm right and all the rest of you are wrong, let the river run backward that's next to the house of study. They look out the window and the river starts running backwards. And they're like, we don't make halachic decisions based on rivers. So then he says, you know what? If I'm right, God, have a voice come out of the heavens, a bat kol, and say the laws with Rabbi Eliezer. A voice comes out of the sky and says, Rabbi Eliezer is right and the rest of you are wrong. And they're like, we don't do halakhah based on God's voice coming from heaven. And then he says, if I'm right, let the walls of the Beit Midrash fall in on all of us because we're going against God's will. And the walls start to fall in and they stop at a 45-degree angle. And that's the end of the story. So it's a Misa. The Misa seems to be coming to teach something like Halakhah goes on. By the way, this is what it means. The Torah is not in heaven. They quote it. The Torah is not in heaven. And it is not so complex that you have to ask God what it means. The Torah is down below for us who live below, l'chaim, embrace the tree of life. And so we have to make our Jewish halachic decisions, govern our communities as best we can. But it's no longer about whether God thinks it's right or wrong. And that leaves room. I mean, we want to hope we please God. That leaves room for this justice. Sometimes we are not serving justice because we're so busy trying to regulate what's fair, what works. We're trying to do our best, but we make mistakes. So sometimes in our life, maybe, God's appearing not in the halakhah, but in your life experience, in a story that changes you. I'll try to give you a modern example everyone can relate to. So, how about sitting Shiva for someone who's had dementia for 5 years? Okay, because this comes up a lot. And I'm like, okay, the law says you have to sit Shiva for 7 days. And they turn to me and they say, Rav Nadav, I've been sitting Shiva for years. You have no idea. And I don't. I have not lived that experience. They're like, I can't, it would be weird for me to sit 7 days and be like, let's talk about mom, because mom hasn't quite been mom for many years. And I've already gone through so much grief. I've gone through grief groups, you know, and you're telling me you need 7 days because that's what we do. It's called grief. It's a 7 day period. It's like people who say, you got to do 12 steps and 12 steps. You can't skip a step. You can't do them out of order. That's why it's called 12 steps. But then you talk to people in 12 step and they're like, of course you can do them out of order. Like, because you have to also see what's right for the individual. So the question is, should we make a halakhah that says, something, if your loved one had dementia and you've already gone through grief, then Shiva is only 2 days or 1 day. No, you don't need to change the law every time you run into a lived experience that requires chesed, that requires a change. And you better be aware when it's happening and know what to practice. I mean, I get nasty emails when I do, and they bother me. I got an email about the last funeral that happened. I don't know who you are. I don't know this Beth Israel. I'm writing you because I know the deceased. You're supposed to put them in the ground right away. It's been a whole, what did you tell the family? What kind of rabbi are you? And I wrote back a very nice email that just said, it was the family's decision to have the funeral when they did, and I'm supporting the family. I just like one line, but so like there is a tension between halakha. So people want to say, just change the halakha. I that's not We have changed halakha in the past, by the way. That can happen, but you want to be able to only do it where it's really clear that it applies to everyone. So our life really is a combination of a pattern for living, a spiritual discipline, and not being overly judgmental of it, but trying to like, look, sometimes Purim comes and I'm not ready to laugh. But you know what? Instead of saying, if you're not ready, for people who are not ready to laugh on Purim, postpone it a month. Have a spiel in a month. It's fine. Why not? I'm loving and chesed is it's for we should be living a spiritual life in which we tailor things to individuals without having to change the overarching principles. You know, if someone, I mean, so anyway, I've talked a lot. I mean, but I could give a million examples. So that's, I think, one of the things. So why doesn't the Talmud simply state a new law about gatehouses and the poor? So what do you think? Why doesn't the Talmud just state a new law about gates? Why don't they just say, yes, HOAs can compel people to, but something. Story. It's a good one. On the day that Rabbi died. So there's no law here. This is straight up Misa. It just appears in the middle of the Talmudic section on wedding documents, Ketubot, wedding contracts. On the day that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi died, the sages decreed a fast and begged for divine mercy so that he would not die. And they said, they made a rule. Anyone who says that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi has died will be stabbed with a sword. So what's going on? He's beloved. He's the great leader, and they don't want to bring bad luck. And they're going to pray for him. The maidservant of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi ascended to the roof and prayed. By the way, she has no name. I think that's significant because often when you're practicing chesed, what's the right word for it? You're trying to be, without getting the ego involved, something like a channel, an instrument of God. That sounds pretentious. A channel for a flow. You're not, so it doesn't matter what your name is. I think the most profound prophet is probably Deutero-Isaiah. He doesn't even have a name, all the middle chapters of Isaiah, because it wasn't Isaiah. So the maidservant, and also, is she educated? No. She's probably an uneducated maid, so probably illiterate. She prays. Now, is she praying from the prayer book? No. A prayer from her heart. The upper realms are requesting the presence of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. She's on the roof. She's between heaven and earth. The upper realms are requesting the presence of Yehuda Nasi. The lower realms are requesting the presence of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. It's a tug of war. May it be the will of God that the lower world should impose their will upon the upper world. So she can see the rabbis are praying by his bedside. They're praying in Minyan. They're praying in the chapel. They're praying in the Beit Midrash. Everyone's praying. The whole country's praying. We're all fasting. Let him not die. Let him recover. Let him recover. And she can see, though, she has a sense that he's being called. This is his time to die. However, when she saw how often he resorted to the privy, painfully taking off his tefillin and putting them on again each time, she changed her prayer. God, let the upper worlds impose their will upon the lower worlds. May their prayers be favored. As the rabbis were continuously praying for heavenly mercy, in other words, they're praying for healing, she took up a jar and she threw it down from the roof to the ground. For one moment of that crash, the rabbis went, "What was that?" And in that instant, the soul of Rabbi departed to its eternal rest.
Because they had stopped praying.
Because they had stopped praying. Go, said the rabbis to Bar Kapara, find out what's going on. Why the crash? He went and finding the rabbi and he found the rabbi had died, tore his cloak, turned the tear backwards, ripped his clothing. On returning to the rabbis, he began, it's a very strange story. The angels and the mortals both were holding the holy ark. Remember, the word for coffin and ark are the same, aron. The angels have overpowered the mortals, and the holy ark has been captured by the angels. Has the soul, they asked him, gone to its eternal rest? He replied, "You said it, not me." I don't understand. I think short stories are hilarious. Like, it's the most serious story, and it ends with, because he'll get killed if he said the rabbi died. So, like, did rabbi die? I didn't say he did. Stop you with the story. It's like a Woody Allen ending, if I can still say that. Anyway, this is really about the kinds of stuff that you and I want to talk about in terms of God, and in terms of reading situations, in terms of being present for other people, in terms of understanding what the justice of the moment demands. But the halakhah is we're all getting together now to pray for our mentor so that he should be healed, and this is the right thing to do, and we're all going to do a fast, and it's all good, and let's all get together, and we'll meet at 3:00, and all that's good stuff. They're not bad. But but it took this person to be like, I'm going to interrupt. Go. Anybody wish to comment? I just said, how's it fit Heschel's model, but you don't have to answer that question because I know we're getting to the end.
I wasn't going to say anything about that in particular, but you're talking about situational awareness and making decisions that you as a rabbi would need to make for a certain situation and change whatever needs to be done. But what about the people themselves? We need to know about the flexibility and know what we can call on ourselves and what we can violate and not feel bad about violating without necessarily you as rabbi coming in and doing that. How do people know what to do?
So you're allowed to push back on this answer, okay? My answer is that's why you need a rabbi. I'm really, one of the things I'm concerned about is that Judaism really changed in the late 1990s and early aughts, because the internet made it so that people would just answer their question on the internet. And also Art Scroll Press started with this idea that we should publish answers to all the questions. So if you have this idea that Judaism is passing on the questions and rituals and halachot, yes, but that you're supposed to get, like, you have a doctor, right? You don't just go to WebMD, right? No, you're supposed to have a person who can channel the complexity of the moment and assist you and be that social worker or that therapist. I mean, that therapists are going to get replaced by artificial intelligence. I mean, they're going to be programmed absolutely to incorporate the best of scientific thing, but to listen to you and be compassionate, which is terrible. So my attitude is that's exactly what the rabbi is supposed to do. right? I'm not there to, I mean, Heschel says, I mentioned Heschel would like, the Rebbe is someone who connects you to God. I'm not a Rebbe, I'm a rabbi. I realize that, you know, my job is, if my job is to connect people to God, I'm probably going to be a failure. Like my job is do my best to connect myself to God and do my best. But rabbi means teacher. But it doesn't mean teacher like you can go read a book. I really think, Roanne, that it's exactly like what Roanne basically asked me, shouldn't people have can you give people access to this information so that they don't feel they're doing the wrong thing? I'm not doing Shiva right, or I'm not going to tell the rabbi because we're going to do cremation and not a burial or whatever it is. And so what I really wish is we could have a community where people would consult with me because I think that's where I do my best work. I think I do my best work when people would let me in. I wasn't going to say anything, Rabbi, but my husband doesn't know I'm here, but our adult son's not going to get his son circumcised. And my husband said, don't tell the rabbi, it'll just bum him out or piss him off. There's nothing he can do. And I'm like, I'm glad you came to me. Let's talk about covenant. Let's talk about circumcision. Maybe I can help. I've been in this situation before. I've seen, or Shiva. So when people call and they're like, I really do help with the situational awareness. So like I will be saying things like, well, you want to postpone the funeral a week and a half because you want the grandkids to fly, you want your granddaughter to fly in from France and she has finals next week. No, I get that a lot. They want the grandkids to finish finals. And then I'll say to them, listen, let me give you the benefit of my experience. The reason Judaism, one of the reasons it really wants you to bury quickly, sure, in a time of no refrigeration, there were issues about respecting the body. Now that we have freezers, less so. Chances are between this moment and the actual funeral is time, you'll be in a time warp. A week's going to feel like 3 or 4 weeks. Time will start getting stretched out and it will be endless. You won't be like, well, at least the arrangements are done. Now we have 4 days off. The arrangements will never be done. There'll be more and more questions. It's just inevitable. It's the nature of the business. It's so we got to get there quickly. So my attitude is, you know what? Let's stream it to the grandkids, and let's read something they write, but we're not going to wait a week and a half because she's got finals. On the other hand, if they say, listen, we can't make it there and blah, blah, blah. My answer is the difference between 5 days and 3 days will be a little bit painful, but it's okay. It's okay. I try to read the situation. I really do. I mean, I really, and for some, I may say, let's not do 5, let's do 3. But I really think we need the human element. I think that's what you have a rabbi for. But today, people, honestly, you may not know this just because we're of a different generation than the people I'm in, like my intro to Judaism people who are like in their 20s. People hit the internet, they get on these forums, they type into WhatsApp groups and Reddit groups, and they're like, no, you can't. The book says you can't. Don't get, and I'm always like, there's no human element. So I think that's where I do my best work is helping people navigate situations. Because and then if they say, for example, I tell them that halakhically, and this is on our website, I put on our website, actually, there's a loophole in the Talmud that you can do 2 days of Shiva in addition to the day of burial, and and it's actually less than 2 because you always end the night, you never go, or the early morning. That 2 days of Shiva is sufficient. And most people have never heard that. And I didn't know until I read the Shulchan Aruch. And then I had to go to the teacher at rabbinical school, be like, I'm getting something wrong here. And they're like, why? It says that actually, if you do 2.5 days of Shiva, it's enough. That's not true. Shiva means 7. And they're like, yeah, but the law is right there. 2.5 days is enough. I didn't know that. So I do put it on the website because I'm not trying to deprive people of information. And because I hear what you're saying, which is I hate the fact that Jews opt out of Judaism because they think they're making a mistake. They're doing something wrong. When people bring up cremation with me, as I told the board, and the board changed our policies at Beth Israel based on my advice, which is I said we should be burying cremains in Jewish cemeteries. And they said, what? You can't do that. And I said, it is absolutely true that cremation is against Jewish law. But the halakhah is that you bury the remains. If someone's burned up in a fire, you bury their ashes and their remains. So the halakhah is to bury the remains. If someone ate bacon every day of their life, we still bury them in a Jewish cemetery. So just because someone broke Jewish law in dealing with the body doesn't mean we should deprive the remains of getting a burial. And I give the board credit. By the way, I met with the cemetery committee, the religious affairs committee. I worked the whole process. By the time we got to the board, I explained this, and they were like, we need to hear more about this. I scheduled a study session and I showed them the Halakhah, I showed them my opinion. And then I said, you have two options. One is we bury cremains in the cemeteries, or you go half seas on it. You say, I'm just not, I feel too uncomfortable with it. We will only allow it in the combined Jewish and intermarried section. So at least someone has an option. And that's what they went for. They're like, yeah, give us option two. So we still have a policy that cremains cannot be buried in the Jewish only section, but we have a large Jewish and not Jewish section for people who are parts of families, and which I approve of. And we can bury cremains there now. We do not bring the cremains to the memorial service because that's like serving bacon at the Shiva. We don't break Jewish law, but but so we can still have a memorial service without the body. Or if you're doing, and then talking to the family, I'd say this, could we have the service with the body? So don't cremate yet. And I will just tell people that interment is private or interment is in another location. And they're like, sure. So then we can do a traditional memorial. The fact that honestly, they're breaking Jewish law, the family has chosen to break Jewish law. At least it's not public, which is a big halachic category, which is if you want to smoke on Shabbat, do it with the blinds all drawn and no one knows. Don't go outside and be like, yeah, I smoke on Shabbat. I just really can't help it. But how are you doing, Jeff and Audrey? Like you don't do that. So in other words, do the cremation privately, but at the funeral, we just make a white lie to preserve dignity. And we say, interment is happening separate. We're actually not lying. Interment is happening privately. So we just say that. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm talking too much, but I love those questions. I know it's 8:19. Can I just give you one more story from the text, and then we'll call it a class. I may teach this another day. It's a story found in the laws of Mishnah Avodah Zarah, meaning the prohibitions on idol worship. Now, I gave you an example. It's on the back page, text 3. These are just a few of the halachot. You get pages and pages of individual laws, but I just gave you 4 examples. A Jew is forbidden from patronizing shops that have idolatrous displays, since these indicate a portion of profits are dedicated to them. Go ahead.
Does that include going into a bookstore that's got pictures of Schneerson on the wall?
Oh my God. Idol worship. The question was, how about those who put pictures of Rebbe Schneerson in idolatrous fashion? A Jew may not sell certain goods to non-Jews. They're typically used in idol worship. A Jew may not help build an idol worship site, though he may join in building a private bathhouse. However, when he reaches the part where the idol is placed in a Hellenistic bathhouse, he must not build. There's things about renting. A bathhouse comes up again, because remember, you wouldn't normally have hot water in an individual ref. If you wanted to go to bathe in Hellenistic society, you went to a bathhouse where that was happening, a pool. And the 4th one in particular, if one finds utensils, I actually get this question in other ways. If one finds utensils with the image of the sun or the moon or a dragon on them, he should get rid of them utterly by casting them into the Dead Sea. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, if the image is on a valuable utensil, they are prohibited, but if in a common utensil, they are permitted. I get this question regarding things like decorations. I want to put a Buddha in my backyard. Am I allowed to put a Buddha in my backyard? Am I allowed to put, a Chinese religion, a Taoist display up? Can I do so? Art ornaments. So people ask me, is that okay? Can I have that up in my house? And I go by this 4th one, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, which is the rule there is, if that's a $10,000 Buddha, the answer is no. Because the only reason that statue of the Buddha is $10,000 is the person who made it thinks of it as like, this is to be for religious purposes. If you picked it up at the, what do you call it, the greenhouse place, so on the way to Livonia, and they're like, it's on sale for $45, then you can have it. Because I know you're not going to use it, Harvey, for idolatrous purposes. And so it's an ornament. So halakhah, it's quantitative, it's easy to follow, right? Sure, you can say what's valuable, what's not valuable, but come on. So I love halakhah. Now the story. a famous story. A Greek put a question to Rabban Gamliel in Akko when Rabban Gamliel was bathing in the public bathhouse of Aphrodite. Hellenistic culture, he's going to the bathhouse. He's getting clean. Proclo, and he's got money because rich people go to the bathhouse. Proclo said to him, I thought it was written in your Torah that nothing at all involved in the worship of other gods may touch your hand. It's in Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 18. So why are you bathing here in the bathhouse of Aphrodite? I've got news for everyone in case you don't know this already. Having spent a lot of time studying Talmud, which we had to study basically 3 to 4 hours a day, all through rabbinical school, I will tell you, every time it says it's a Greek or a non-Jew asking, it's not a Greek or a non-Jew asking, it's a Jew asking. I just want to tell you, because you always know their Talmud and their Bible super well. And it happens a lot. It happens when they're talking usually about theology and really delicate questions. Like then they don't want to put it in the mouth of a Jew to ask these sensitive, controversial questions. Raman Gamliel replied, you know what? We don't talk Torah in a bathhouse. Okay, we could dissect this. That's worth dissecting, but let's keep going. Rabban Gamliel, so they went out of the bathhouse. Now he said to them, he said, okay, the reason I'm in there is I did not come into her domain. She came into mine. Nobody would say the bath was made as an adornment for Aphrodite. They would say Aphrodite was made as an adornment for the bath. Now, he's not on solid ground here. I just want to say he went to the bathhouse of Aphrodite, and the halachot are not. Trust me, there are a lot of other halachas that he's not in the spirit of the halacha here. But what he's saying is, it's not a temple of Aphrodite where they have a bathhouse. It's a bathhouse, and they stuck Aphrodite up in the corner. So I don't care. Another reason is that even if you were suddenly given a large sum of money, you wouldn't enter the presence of Aphrodite to say, thank you, I just won the lottery. Thanks be the god Aphrodite, while you were naked, and I'm sorry, or had old semen crusted on you, nor would you urinate in front of it. But this statue stands by a sewer. All the people are urinating before it, and that's why we're coming to scrub off. The Torah stated that the prohibition regarding their gods is what they behave toward as a deity is permitted, but what they do not behave toward as a deity is permitted, prohibited and permitted. Now, there are commentaries on this. The Talmud continues, which is his answer is problematic because there are specific gods who are the gods of elimination. So I forget the name. You may know it. I used to know it. It starts with, I think, with a P. So in other words, sometimes their outhouses or whatever you call it, the fancy public outhouses for the rich actually are parts of temples. And for anyone who's ever had problems going to the bathroom, which is a real thing, and we of course say it in the morning. When you wake up in the morning, part of Birkat Shachar is thank God that my pipes are working. And you're supposed to say that after evacuating your pipes. So it's a little bit disingenuous. But all I want to say is, so we have rules. And they say, don't go to the temple of Aphrodite with the other Greeks and be like, here I am at the temple of Aphrodite. I'm doing a schwitz. And then they say, because he's very wealthy, he's one of the wealthiest of the rabbis, but you go to where the rich people go and you go in there and he goes, it's okay, don't worry about it. And I would say that it doesn't lead to a correction of the Halakhah. Well, he's saying, in my totality of being, it's okay. It's okay. I'm giving you different kinds of stories. Some are like I will say, I think it had an influence a little bit because his son, Rabbi Gamliel's son, was Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. And if you look at rule number 4 came from Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. It came from his son. And if you look at it, it is lessening the severity of the halakha, right? The earlier ones are like, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. And then he's the one who said, if it's an ornament, don't worry about it, right? And I'm like, I think he got it from his father. But so sometimes laws can get modified, and we are regional. Sometimes, maybe if you look at the Beth Israel website and you go under memorial and mourning, and I have a whole set of laws right now, I'll say, Shua can be completed in 2.5 days, where one of those days is the day of the burial. And, you should know that. You're not going to find that on Chabad.com. So like different rabbis, so Shimon ben Gamliel goes in this direction, another rabbi, I'm sure Shammai would say, oh my God, no, you can't have the cheapo Buddha in your backyard. What's he talking? No, you can't go to the bathhouse of Aphrodite. Of course you can. So it does, so I'll leave it at that, which is, so I feel like going back to Heschel and just ending with a quote. The interrelationship of Halakhah and Aggadah is the very heart of Judaism. Halakhah without Aggadah is dead. Aggadah without Halakhah is wild. I think that's brilliant. I want to thank everyone for the course. I mean, I'll stay another couple of minutes in case anyone wants to chat, but I know for the last session I went kind of late, and all those things. But please know that I'm really grateful to all of you who stuck out the course. I know we lost the majority of folks along the way. I take personal. Wait, what? So, well, no, exactly. I have a good group on Zoom. You guys are great, and
Worries about the weather.
yeah. And I have a style. Some people are expecting something different, and I can't be everything to everyone at every moment. And I make my decisions. And there are different kinds of classes and things like that. But I meant to say that because I really want to say that, like, I know that it's not. I mean, I doubt this was the course that everyone was expecting. None of my courses are like that. My Kabbalah course, I doubt, was what people are expecting, but it's what I feel called upon to preach. So like my Kabbalah course, people found it complicated and a lot of lecture. And my attitude is the same thing Reb Elliott said at his lecture on Monday, which is, if I gave you a piece of Zohar, it wouldn't make any sense to talk about it because practically every word needs a footnote. So I understand that my courses, I do a lot of talking. It's not for everyone. It may not be the thing you were expecting. So the fact that you guys stuck it out, all of you, it means a lot to me, both personally. It says a lot about your character. It says a lot about your patience. And it was a menschlichkeit thing to do. I should say, menschlich thing to do. So I want to thank you for sticking it out this far. I had a lot of fun. And
Thank you for
Not at
being
all.
Rav Nadav,
that
because
it's all I could be.
whatever you're doing, whatever you do with
Exactly.
any of your courses
Nobody gets.
is you.
Thank you. I feel that way. You know the Reb Zusius story. Of course, you know the Reb Zusius story, but Reb Zusius spent his whole life. He was not the smartest of the rabbis. He wasn't the best teacher of the rabbis, and he certainly wasn't the most attractive. And then said he got to heaven and he apologized to God for all those three things. And God said, that's not what you should be apologizing for. The apologizing for is you spend your whole life trying to be someone else. You should have just been yourself. Just be Reb Zusia. I'm going to read some of the things. Yeah, that was a good point. I'm just reading what you. Depends on what other. Yeah, good point. Of other bathhouses. Right. If he could have gone to a bathhouse, the problem is the Romans were building them in a lot of ways. But I mean, you can make. In Indonesia, I didn't have hot water. When I desperately needed hot water, mostly you bathe in freezing cold water. But when I desperately needed it, I put a kettle on fire and I heat up the water. And for like 5 bars, I was like, oh, I felt great. And then I was like, okay, time to get dressed again. You didn't have to go to the bathhouse. You wanted to go to the bathhouse. I'm very sympathetic to people who, well, I'll tell you a place where I break Halakhah. Let me not record anymore. No, I don't want to, no, I'm serious. I don't want to be, how do I even stop the recording? Um, uh, Oh, I don't even know where it goes. Okay, I can't figure out stuff. I'll tell you where a place where I break halacha. I rarely get to see our parents who are in their 90s. And my family is surprised, my relatives. When I go see Lynn's family or I go visit my parents, and I will drive on Shabbat. I often am not there very long. I'll take my dad to the pharmacy to get that thing he needs because I'm like, Dad, you need the boot, and it's not. I refuse to say this is saving a life. Saving a life is saving a life. This is me breaking Shabbat because I want to be with my parents. And so they were really surprised because, they know I keep Shabbat. And then they're like, but every time you visit us, you get in the car and you drive from the Airbnb over to our house and you bring lunch and you set it up and you're like making coffee and this, and you took a picture with us. I mean, what are you doing? You know, actually, I didn't take a picture. I'll wait till it's not Shabbat for that. But I'll bring and even my kids were like, Dad, what are you doing? And I was like, listen, you know, time is limited. For me, this is just what I feel called to. I don't want to make an excuse, though. I don't want to be like, well, you're honoring the fifth commandment. Stop it. Stop lawyering all the time. I don't want to lawyer. I'm breaking Shabbat to see my parents. That's my Aggadah. I'm okay. That's me being like, I'm in the bathhouse. Shut up, Harvey, about Aphrodite. I didn't even notice her. You know what I mean? Like, stop giving me grief. I want to take a bath. So for me, it's like I want to see my parents and I want to be there, and I don't want to be like I have to wait till it gets dark to go over and
I,
so things like that. Go
I
ahead.
don't think that's a fair analogy. I think taking a bath, I think his rationalization of taking a bath in the bathhouse was a gross post hoc rationalization,
It's a juicy one.
whereas you're seeing your parents actually has an element of holiness to it.
It's you're fair, which is right. I don't know if he's channeling God.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a case of real. I mean, it's a really interesting question, which is yeah, no, I'll just leave it at that. Some when do we know whether we're when I say something like I'm going to express the totality of my being even if it violates halakha? When do we know when we're really expressing the totality of our being, and when do we know when we're merely being selfish? Because I am a great believer that never underestimate, never overestimate. I don't know what the word is. I always get that mixed up.
The answer is if you ask the question.
If you ask the question, I was going to say never underestimate a human being's capacity for self-deception. And so, people can say I'm doing it on principle, but sometimes I wouldn't say it's on principle. So it's hard, but I mean, Jim said, at least ask the question, but at least you guys I mean, you're getting a sense of why I don't think the answer is always to change the halacha or to get angry at halacha. Sometimes we just have to embrace that my path diverges here, but I don't want to go up and make a big deal to everyone else that this is the right thing to do for everybody. And I think that's an important sense of it.
Years ago, I had a couple of teachers who talked about how the Shulchan Aruch was the thing that killed Judaism because it instituted set regulations that everybody could be judged against. And without that, there is this gray area of the Halakhah says this, but the Aggadah says this, and I'm torn between those two. There's a tension between the two, and I've thought about it, and now I decide this. And we had that freedom up until the Shulchan Aruch.
I'm going to follow that up with something that's very relevant to all of us that we all know. When we were faced with, as a movement or halakhically, how do we deal with homosexuality and queer relationships? And I'm talking about many decades ago. So how do we deal with the Leviticus chapter 16 and all this kind of stuff? I read some very interesting articles I was required to read in rabbinical school. And it relates directly to this. The way we normally do that halakhically is there are ways through legal codes, and it's just like American law. You really want to do something, it's not in the legal codes. Let's say personal privacy, as famously is not so much in the US Constitution. There are ways to make legalistic moves to allow something that had previously been forbidden. And that's basically what I generally answer the question. If someone says, how did the conservative, and I get this question, and we do it in the Intro to Judaism course at that table. How did the conservative movement allow it? And I give them the halachic answer. There are a couple of halachic movies you can make that are standard ways of doing halacha for thousands of years, even within the Torah itself. So, for example, I mean, you have capital punishment, you can do it, but then the Talmud outlaws capital punishment by a legalistic maneuver. Or you're not allowed to have Shabbos Goy, and then the Talmud allows Shabbos Goys, which directly contradicts the Torah, but you have legalistic moves. So you use the legal process to make a legal accommodation. but there was a great article, and if I remember right, it might have been written by Rabbi Ed Feld, who edited the Lev Shalem, and actually was my former Hillel rabbi at Princeton. So he said, why can't Aggadah? And he knows all like exactly in these definitions. But he said, why can't Aggadah be a basis for changing Halakhah? Like, because we're talking about like, why can't Aggadah be like my lived experience? And it's not just like I've got a gay neighbor and we're pals. I mean, there's that too, but there's like, this is not justice. This is wrong. Like gay relationships are loving relationships. And we want to bring them under the aegis of Halakhah, of ketubah, of kiddushin, of commitment, all those things. Why can't we just say everything in our being, agadically, says we should be allowing this? Why do we have to do any halachic maneuvers? But I go back to kind of what Jim said, which is, can halakha, or on some level, can too much halakha kill the spirit of Judaism? I just thought, I'm raising it as a question. I thought, why not do the legal accommodations? We have methods to do that. And they do that. I mean, one of the simple ways you can do it is even in the Torah, you limit the application of a case in order to, and so like the Talmud says, capital punishment's awesome, fantastic, you can do it. Of course you can do it. It's just, if you actually look at the application, it only applies in 0.001% of the cases, right? So they limit its application. Similarly, you can say that the laws of men not sleeping with men as they would with a woman, they only apply to, let's say, to cases of incest, because that chapter largely deals with the context of incest. And so it says that in the cases of family relationships, gay sex count as sex and would count as violated. So, but they don't apply. Obviously, incest is not where two people want to get married and they're not related. So there are ways to do it. Anyway, but I just want to raise as a question, which is, I think it's a great question. I still am more safe, which is we have a legal process. We can make legal accommodations. I mean, people yelled at me about saying that Zoom is okay to use for Minyan. But my attitude is, I got out the Shulchan Aruch, and it says, it says you have to be in the same building. So people are like, so the Orthodox tell me, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. It says you have to be in the same building, except that
You can be in a window.
you can be through a window. If you see through, and the other thing is, or you can count two different rooms. So for me, I'm comfortable using halakha, even when people say, that's why I can't stand conservative Jews, you don't care about halakha. That's where I think the shulchan, the people say, people who take the absolute law is the law. And I'm like, you can't even look at the next sentence and see the human dimension. So I think there's plenty of room. My personal view is there's plenty of room for human dimension in halakha, but there is absolutely the case that a lot of people have embraced halakha so much that they have lost their humanity.
Again,